Today, I want to take you into a real plot twist in human history. You know that classic idea that everything began in Africa, and then humans spread across the world in one straight, one-way journey? Well, new fossil discoveries and ancient DNA, especially from Spain, are showing that the story may be a lot less simple and a lot more fascinating. Over the past few years, researchers have been pulling human remains out of deep caves and even out of forgotten museum collections across Eurasia. And the more these remains are studied, the clearer it becomes that our past didn't follow a neat straight line. Instead of one single migration wave, the evidence points to repeated movements, back and forth. Populations spread out, met each other, mixed, disappeared, reappeared, like the ancient world was crisscrossed by multiple routes at the same time. And this is where Spain steps right into the spotlight. In the Atapuerca region, one of the most important archaeological sites on Earth, scientists have found more than 80 fossil fragments around 850,000 years old, linked to a species called Homo antecessor. Some researchers argue that this species may belong to a larger mysterious group that could be related to the famous Dragon Man fossil from China. If that connection holds up, we're looking at a population spread from Western Europe all the way to East Asia, almost the entire width of Eurasia. That possibility changes everything, because it suggests that some of the biggest branching points in the human family tree might not have happened in Africa, as many researchers long assumed, but outside of it. For decades, the dominant view was that major human lineages split in Africa first, and only later expanded into other regions. But now, some of the oldest fossils that appear close to the common ancestor of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern humans are showing up in places like Spain and China. Chris Stringer, from London's Natural History Museum, one of the best-known supporters of the out-of-Africa model, told Science that these new findings force an uncomfortable question. What if the common ancestor of those major lineages lived in Eurasia? Many researchers still think Homo sapiens likely emerged in Africa, but the new evidence opens up another possibility, that our ancestors diverged somewhere in Eurasia and only later moved back into Africa.
Where was the beginning of the Homo sapiens lineage? Where was the split? So we know that we and the Denisovans and the Neanderthals are relatively closely related. We had a common ancestor maybe 600,000 years ago. We don't actually know where that common ancestor lived. I used to think it probably lived in Africa, but actually we don't know. So that common ancestor could have lived, let's say, in Western Asia. And then some forms moved into Europe and became eventually Neanderthals. Some forms moved into China and Southeast Asia, and they became Homo longi or Homo daliensis. Some forms moved then into Africa and then began the evolution of Homo sapiens. So even where the common ancestor lived, we can't be sure. That bit of the story could even have been outside of Africa, and there was an inter-Africa event that began the evolution.
In other words, not just journeys out of Africa, but journeys back in. One of the most jaw-dropping discoveries behind this debate comes from a site in northern Spain called Sima de los Huesos, literally, the pit of bones. Deep inside a cave system, scientists found remains from at least 28 individuals, roughly 400,000 years old, preserved under unusually stable conditions. Researchers were even able to extract DNA from a thigh bone known as femur 13, producing, at the time, the oldest human DNA ever sequenced. And the result was shocking. The mitochondrial DNA from these individuals looked closer to Denisovans, a group linked mainly to Siberia and parts of Asia, than to Neanderthals, which is what you'd expect from ancient humans in Europe. But here's the twist. The bones themselves show several Neanderthal-like features. So on the outside, they look closer to Neanderthals, but their maternal genetic line points toward Denisovans. Svante Pääbo, One of the key scientists behind this work described the results as astonishing, because it proved we can study DNA from human ancestors hundreds of thousands of years old. But there's an important detail here. Mitochondrial DNA only tracks the maternal line. It's a tiny slice of ancestry, just one thread in a much bigger genetic tapestry. The rest of their ancestry could tell a very different story. So, what does that mean? It suggests ancient human populations mixed far more than we used to imagine. There may have been repeated interbreeding between different groups, very old maternal lineages that persisted for long periods, or even gene flow from human populations we haven't clearly identified yet. However the puzzle is solved, one thing becomes hard to deny. Eurasia was packed with different hominin groups, interacting in ways that weren't simple or isolated. Even the skeletons hint at that complex world. Some leg bones from the site suggest very robust individuals. One estimate points to a female around 1.67 meters tall and close to 90 kilograms. A powerful build, likely well adapted to cold ice age conditions. And that kind of robustness isn't unique. Denisovan remains also hint at strong, sturdy bodies. The big picture is this. There wasn't just one type of human living back then. There were multiple kinds of humans living in harsh environments, sometimes side by side. Now, back to Homo antecessor, because this species is one of the most debated pieces of the puzzle. What makes it so fascinating is the mix of traits. Parts of the skull and teeth look archaic, but the face appears surprisingly modern, flatter in a way that reminds some researchers of our own species. That contrast stands out even more when you compare it to later Neanderthals, who developed a more projecting midface and prominent brow ridges. Because of that, some scientists argue that Homo antecessor may sit close to the last common ancestor of modern humans, Neanderthals and Denisovans. Others think it may simply represent an early, variable European population rather than a distinct species. The debate is still open, but what's clear is that Spain keeps showing up at the center of it. And when researchers compare European fossils to African ones, the story gets even richer. Take the famous Turkana boy, a young Homo ergaster from about 1.5 million years ago. He had a tall, slender body built for long-distance travel, and a brain volume around 880 cubic centimeters as a youth, possibly closer to 950 as an adult. Interestingly, juvenile Homo antecessor skulls have been estimated near 1,000 cubic centimeters, within the lower range of modern humans. Even more intriguing, the internal shape of Turkana boy's skull shows asymmetries associated with functions that, in later humans, relate to language and complex motor planning. That doesn't mean he spoke like we do, but it hints that the neurological foundations for speech and advanced coordination may have been developing very early. Put all of this together, and one message becomes hard to ignore. Human evolution wasn't a ladder, and it wasn't a clean line that starts at one point and moves in one direction. It looks much more like a web, full of branching paths, crossings, meetings, and mixtures. Populations moved, split, reconnected, exchanged genes, vanished, and gave rise to new groups. In that kind of world, Eurasia, and especially the Iberian Peninsula, may have played a far bigger role in our story than we once believed. Spain, once treated like a side chapter, now looks like one of the main stages. And as technology keeps improving, allowing us to extract older DNA and analyze fossils more precisely, this story is only going to get more complicated. But one thing is already clear. Our origins don't trace a simple path. They run through forests, mountains, and plains of an ancient world crowded with many different kinds of humans, connected by migration, encounters, and genetic mixing across hundreds of thousands of years. And every new discovery adds another piece to this incredible puzzle.